Dragons and Wyverns. The main difference between a dragon and a wyvern is that dragons usually have 6 limbs, whereas wyverns have only 4. In other words, dragons usually have rear legs, wings, and arms. But the dragons in A Song of Ice and Fire do not have arms. They only have 4 limbs, their legs and their wings. So some fans say that the dragons are actually wyverns, and I hear you. But the thing is, dragons are not real, neither are wyverns. So George R.R. Martin gets to define and describe the creatures in his universe however he wants, and he calls them dragons. Moreover, this is not too widely known, but in the world of Ice and Fire, wyverns are actually mentioned in the Sithorios chapter. They are a completely separate creature from dragons in the terms of the world of Ice and Fire. One maester claims that blood mages in Valyria created dragons from wyvern stock. Now I don't buy that, but my point is, Drogon is not a wyvern because George R.R. Martin says that he's a dragon, and George is the boss. So why did George do this? I'll throw a link to a mini documentary with the talented actress who plays Shay and George R.R. Martin at his house. He tells her that no creature in real life has ever had arms and wings. The reason is probably due to natural selection, evolution. Animals' flippers turned to legs and arms, and in some species the arms eventually evolved into wings. So even though he is writing fantasy, he said he wanted his creatures to be more realistic. If you think about it, the way that Drogon walks around on the joints of his wings is kind of like a bat. So let's quickly touch on the characteristics of dragons and wyverns from fantasy as a whole. First, let's look at dragons. Western dragons are the ones like Smaug in The Hobbit. They are usually really smart, love treasure, they're conniving, sometimes their coloring determines what powers they have or how powerful they are. In some stories like The Witcher, dragons can even shapeshift. In other words, they can turn themselves into other creatures or even humans. And in many stories they are telepathic. Basically, dragons are at the top of the food chain in stories. They are the unicorns of fantasy. But Eastern dragons are different. They are not the bad guys. They are often given sort of a heavenly role. Picture Shenron from Dragon Ball Z. The dude can fly, even though he does not have wings. He's magical. He can grant wishes, just like our friend Genie. Most dragons are scaled, although my boy Oran is a gray, scaleless dragon in the awesome series Age of Fire. That series is really cool. The scaled dragons in it have hoards of metals, not just for the greed of wealth, but because they eat metals to replenish their scales after battle. Oran doesn't have scales, so unlike most dragons, he is not burdened by the lust for gold and silver. I'll throw links in the video description in case anyone wants to buy those. It's a very light read compared to most high fantasy series, but that's a good thing sometimes, and sometimes you need a break from a heavy lift. And the story is intentionally written in a way that it can be enjoyed by adults and youth alike. So there won't be any descriptive sex scenes like we see in the 50 Shades of Grey chapters of A Song of Ice and Fire. And just a heads up, even though there are humans, elves, dwarves, and other creatures in that series, dragons are the main characters. They are very humanized, kind of like Watership Down back in the day. Good ones, bad ones, happy ones, sad ones, and incredibly selfless, brave ones. Check it out. Ultimately, dragons come in all different shapes and forms and abilities, depending on the author. Now let's look at wyverns. Sometimes, wyverns have beaked mouths, and they often have poisonous, barbed tails. They typically walk around the ground on 2 legs, with their wings sort of tucked in like a bird. But as we mentioned earlier, George's dragons walk around like bats on the joints of their wings. Wyverns are usually smaller than dragons and less intelligent, more like a make-believe animal, which is in stark contrast to the highly intelligent, talking dragons. So let's keep this short. The fact of the matter is, George is the boss. He calls them dragons, so they are dragons. But I figured I'd share this with you in case any of your buddies start claiming that the dragons are really wyverns. They are not right in terms of A Song of Ice and Fire, but their argument makes sense in terms of fantasy as a whole. The dragons in A Song of Ice and Fire are physically similar to wyverns, at least before Season 7 of the show, because now they are massive. I've never seen a wyvern get that big.